think one of the biggest lies women believe is that they have to pick one identity and stay there forever. Especially women who are curious, creative, multi passionate, women who evolve a lot. At some point, people stop seeing your growth as evolution and start seeing it as instability. And if enough people say that out loud, you start questioning yourself too. I know because I have lived a lot of lives already. I was the holistic coach making salad jars before it was trendy. I taught dance fitness. I had chickens, a garden. I homeschooled for a season. Then, after my divorce, I went to coding boot camp at 42 years old, surrounded by people younger than my oldest daughter. And now I work in tech, and somewhere in the middle of all that, I became a business coach helping coaches sell high ticket offers online. And from the outside, every pivot probably looked random, but from the inside, every version of me was trying to get closer to something, closer to alignment and how God actually designed me. And I think a lot of women secretly want to reinvent themselves, but they feel guilty for changing because people got attached to an older version of them, the dependable version that made sense. And when you start changing directions, people get uncomfortable. And it's not because they are against you, but it may force them to question why they abandoned parts of themselves. And something else I had to learn is this: growth changes relationships. Sometimes when you start evolving, the distance between you and other people becomes more noticeable because one person is stretching into a new version of themselves and the relationship has to stretch too. And sometimes people grow with you, but sometimes it takes time. And sometimes you feel pressure to shrink back down just to make everybody comfortable again. The gap has to close somehow. But staying stagnant to preserve closeness eventually becomes its own kind of grief. And honestly, reinventing yourself sounds exciting online, but in real life, it feels embarrassing sometimes. You are a beginner again. You do not know what you're doing. You're sitting in rooms where everybody else seems more experienced than you. You feel behind. And for high achieving women, especially, reinvention feels threatening because competence became part of your identity. You were the smart one, the responsible one, and the one who knew what she was doing all the time. Now, suddenly you're learning again, failing again, starting over again, and your ego hates that. One of my favorite quotes is by Cynthia Ocelli: "For a seed to achieve its greatest expression, it must come completely undone. The shell cracks, its insides come out, and everything changes." To someone who doesn't understand growth, it would look like complete destruction. So tragically beautiful. God will often disrupt identities that are too small for where He's taking you. And the disruption feels like failure at first. You lose interest in things that used to define you. You outgrow rooms, you outgrow conversations and goals you once prayed for. And instead of trusting the transition, you panic because the old identity is dying before the new one feels solid. But that middle season, that is the hardest part. It's not who you are anymore, but it's not who you are becoming yet either. And because humans love certainty, we rush to label ourselves quickly. But some seasons are supposed to feel undefined. Reinvention is not always adding something new. Sometimes it is peeling away who you had to become to survive. And I think about this all the time with immigrant daughters like myself. A lot of us learned very early that being loved was tied to achievement. Be smart, useful, make your family proud. They just wanted us to choose the sensible path. Do not waste your potential. So even our dreams became filtered through practicality. And eventually you wake up one day and realize my entire life makes sense on paper, but I do not feel alive inside it. That was part of my story. All the versions of me were not fake. They were real, but some were survival, some were performance, some were conditioning. And now at almost 50, I think the greatest gift God has given me is the courage to keep becoming, to not freeze myself in one identity just because other people understood that version of me better. But God often calls people to grow. Moses was a prince, then he was a shepherd, then he became a leader. David was a shepherd, then a musician, then a warrior, then a king. Peter was a fisherman. Paul was literally persecuting Christians before becoming one of the most influential voices in Christianity. So transformation is all over scripture. Why do we act like changing means something is wrong with us? And I think one of the reasons women stay stuck is because they keep waiting for permission to evolve, permission from family or culture, or even from the version of themselves they already outgrew. Meanwhile, God already moved and they are still emotionally living in old rooms. And I want to say this carefully because I do not believe every impulse means burn your life down. Sometimes wisdom looks like stability, but sometimes stability becomes fear wearing responsibility, and only you and God really know the difference. But if there is something in you quietly asking for more life, more alignment, more truth, pay attention to that. Not every desire is distraction. Some desires are invitations. And the biggest shift for me personally was realizing I do not have to become less of myself to be mature. I do not have to abandon creativity to be responsible. I'm gonna dance forever. I do not have to choose between structure and softness, faith and science, or technology and beauty, discipline and joy. I can hold all of it, and so can you, because God made us as human beings layered, multifaceted. And maybe the woman watching this has been trying so hard to become understandable that she abandoned parts of herself that were actually her purpose. So maybe your reinvention does not start with quitting your job tomorrow. Maybe it starts smaller. Maybe it starts with admitting, I have changed. Maybe it starts with revisiting the thing you loved before survival mode took over. Or maybe it starts with taking one class, making one video, applying for one opportunity, writing one page, going to one dance class. Not to become somebody new, but to come back to someone you abandoned. And I think that is the difference. The healthiest reinventions are usually returns to yourself. So if you have outgrown parts of your life, but you keep convincing yourself you should just be grateful, the 7-day return in my bio and the description is for women ready to stop abandoning themselves quietly. I'm Leah, and I make these videos to remind you that you are not behind. You are allowed to take up space, and life is still inviting you to the dance floor. So come dance with me. Stay on beat. Bye.